Okay, well, thank you all for joining us this evening to talk all about tax credits for 48 Hudson Avenue. We're very excited to be starting on this truly massive project for Historic Albany. It's so exciting. This is something we've been working toward for a really long time. And we're thrilled to be able to share all of this with all of you. For those who are just joining, we are recording it this evening, and we'll be posting this online so you can see it. For those who've heard me say this like 5 times, thank you for your patience. Before we get started, I just want to point out that no money or other consideration is being solicited, and if sent in, it will not be accepted. There's no offer to buy or no offer to buy securities can be accepted. No part of the purchase price can be received until the offering statement is filed. At this point, we are kind of in a testing the waters phase. The only platform, only through the platform of an intermediary funding portal or broker dealer. A person's indication of interest includes no obligation to commit of any kind. Just from a compliance perspective, we have to put that little bit out for all of you. All right. Oh, jumped ahead too far. Okay, so as we get into our evening's agenda, just a few quick housekeeping things before I turn this over to Pam. We are recording again this evening, and if any questions could be held until the end of that particular speaker, you're welcome to put things in the chat or raise your hand so that we can see you have a question, and then we call on you. You're absolutely welcome to turn on your microphone and ask your questions or just in the chat. Okay, I'll let Pam welcome everyone and we'll get started.
Okay, thanks so much, Kara. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Pam Howard. I'm the executive director at Historic Albany Foundation. And I have to say, I echo what Kara just said. We acquired this building in 2013, and we're really starting to work on it in earnest. We had received a $268,000 grant a few years ago that allowed us to do phase 1 and phase 2, which was internal work. We've received another $500,000 earlier, about a year and a half ago through New York State. We were very fortunate in the last 2 weeks to receive a total of $1.7 million in grants, both through the state and federal sources. So we could not be more pleased to be in the position that we're in right now to really be able to finish this building and make it our future home. So what we need now is the next phase is selling the tax credits so that we can really finish up this project and raise the rest of the money and actually be able to move in. So I'm incredibly excited, to be able to even offer this up for the public. So, for anyone who doesn't really understand the tax credit project, HAF, because the building is eligible for both federal and state tax credits, but unfortunately, because Historic Albany Foundation is a not-for-profit, we can't take advantage of that. So the best that we can do is actually sell them to investors. So that's why we're here tonight, just to let everyone know what the process is and see who is interested for when we go live, hopefully in a couple weeks. So again, thank you to everybody who's here tonight, and we look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Pam. All right, I'm going to share my screen again with all of you and just give a little overview of the project. For those of you who aren't super familiar with the building or its history, I'm not going to go way into the history of it right now, but we are doing tours on Friday. So if anyone wants a tour and the whole history, background, whatnot, we can absolutely share that with you on Friday. But tonight we're going to focus on the project itself. As you can see here, our little house in the middle of a sea of parking lots covered with its plywood and corrugated asphalt covering. It's super attractive and looks very, very historic as it is right now. So we are going to be doing something super crazy and restoring it to kind of how it looked in 1728. We are taking kind of a unique approach to the project. We're really just restoring the exterior of the house, how it appeared in 1728. I'm just going to mute anyone that's unmuted at the moment so we don't have too much background. So as you can see here, the house will look a lot like it did then. The interior of the house is going to be very carefully just repaired. We're not going to be covering it up with finishes and reproduction, delft, tile, crown moldings, and plaster. We really want the building's material to speak for itself. It is the oldest building in the city, and it's one of like 3 timber framed urban buildings left from this colonial Dutch period. Which makes those elements really, really important. So we're really committed to making the authenticity of the building kind of shine and not Disneyfying it, if you will. The later editions are all going to be kind of just gently repaired with very unsexy things like heat, bathrooms, and windows and roofs that don't leak, but necessities for the 21st century. So we're very excited, especially about the bathrooms and the heat. So super exciting for us. As you can see on some of the notes here, Historic Albany is going to be the end user. That's probably the favorite question that we get is, well, what's it going to be? And we went through several different possibilities, and we talked to lots of different people. And in the end, we felt that one of the most engaging things for the building actually is something that is a bit more mixed use, and that by Historic Albany using it for a kind of classroom and workshop space on the first floor, where the public can come in and see the house itself all the time through the warehouse. We, attract 10,000 people a year. Our new tool library is always bringing in more people, and it really actually gave us an opportunity to share the building with the most eclectic group of people and people who really appreciate it for what it is. So this is our dream, our future for the Van Ostrande Radliff House. And just some numbers to get in very quickly. As Pam started indicating, it's not cheap. The whole project is $3.7 million. And to date, we have a little over 2.3, which we are thrilled to be able to share that now has all been committed to the project. So the last chunk really is this tax credit offering. So we're looking to raise about $945,000 in tax credits. Also, as Pam kind of mentioned, many people can be an investor in this, and I'm going to hand it over to Will in a few minutes to talk a little bit more about that. But traditionally for tax credit projects, you have one big investor. It's usually a bank or someone that's going to buy all of the tax credits in one shot. Our project is very small as far as tax credit projects go. So there wasn't really one investor that was particularly interested in them. But we also felt crowdfunding it and allowing as many people as kind of were interested to kind of be involved in this actually met our mission and what we wanted to do with the building a lot more. So we will be crowdfunding it through the common owner portal, which means we can have as many investors as we have credits to sell. And we've set the initial investment for $250, which pretty much makes it accessible to anyone. We didn't want people to feel that you had to be exceptionally wealthy or a developer or whatever to be an investor. If it's something that you were interested in and passionate about, you should be able to do it. So that's our project in a nutshell. Any quick questions about the project itself before we delve more into what are these tax credits and how does that possibly affect you? I don't see any hands raised, so we're going to move forward. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Skylar, who's one of our board members. He's also the owner of Fort Orange General Store, which is right around the corner from the Van Ostrande Radliff House. And he just found he's a Van Ostrande. So Skylar, take it away.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I just wanted to take a few moments to sort of share my story and my connection to 48 Hudson and talk about why it's important to downtown overall. So I'm not originally from Albany. I do hail from Watertown, New York, just out north of Syracuse, but my mom's family is from Albany. And so I grew up listening to my grandmother tell me stories of growing up in Albany and going downtown to attend parades and go shopping and attend shows at the Palace Theater. And there's one story where she had a great aunt take her to a vaudeville theater when she was quite young, and we won't get into the details of that, but it was just really cool to hear all those stories growing up. And I actually decided to come to college in Albany at the College of St. Rose and settle here as a resident. So my early career was in downtown. I was with Discover Albany and the Downtown Albany Business Improvement District. And while there, I really fell in love with downtown Albany. I became a downtown resident and eventually purchased a business and moved it downtown, the Fort Orange General Store, which we moved to the Argus building at 412 Broadway. As Kara mentioned, is right around the corner from 48 Hudson. And so I just wanted to be a part of the revitalization of downtown and sort of put my money where my mouth was and be a part of the change that was happening there. So at the same time, I also joined the Historic Albany board and learned about 48 Hudson and the Ostrander name, became familiar with that. And then during COVID, it turns out I was doing some ancestry work, as was pretty much everyone else. And sure enough, the Ostrander name popped up on my dad's side of the family. And I actually did a little bit more digging and pulled out the Bull family history book that my father was part of creating with my great aunt. And sure enough, the Ostrander name is right in there, and it matched up with what I found on Ancestry, and just learned that my sixth great grandfather built 48 Hudson, which what are the chances? So another connection to downtown Albany and to 48 Hudson. And so I just wanted to share that with all of you. Certainly it's an exciting piece of downtown Albany's history. It's an exciting piece of New York State history. So I invite you to do what you can to help restore this building and be a part of that change. So thank you.
Thanks, Skylar. I love how you found this, like, just remote connection. We've come across so many people that have found their Ostranders or Radliffs in one way or another. I mean, it's amazing how prolific these families are. So I love that you're on our board and related too. It's just perfect. All right, we're going to move on to Will Bradshaw, who is with Reimagine Fund, and Will can explain really the meat and potatoes of what these tax credits are and how they work. So Will, why don't you share all of your knowledge with us?
Thanks, Kara. It's really a pleasure to be with y'all this afternoon, evening. I'm in New Orleans, so it's still afternoon here, but I guess early evening in Albany. Kara, can you allow me to share screen?
Oh, sorry. That's so weird. Now all of a sudden it says only host can share. Why don't I share for you? How's that? You just tell me when to.
Okay, let me forward you what I want you to share via email.
Oh, okay. Well, I can see what we can do. Sorry.
Okay,
This is
that's okay.
all right. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Nope, now you can. Yes, we figured it out.
Perfect. Excellent.
Okay, carry on.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about Reimagine Fund, and y'all should be able to see my screen now. Is that correct? Great. Let me get in here. Okay, perfect. So Reimagine Fund is a new business. We work nationwide, based in New Orleans, and we are focused on educating real estate developers and potential investors about the historic tax credit program, and particularly how it can be used for community revitalization, and how community members may be able to use their tax liability in order to invest in that community revitalization. So it is effectively a mechanism by which people can direct their future tax payments to make their own communities work better or do things that they want to see happen. And we are part of a process that I think we have all witnessed in our lives, where economic decision making has moved from the boardroom into the palms of our hands. And we're really kind of working in that same space, but we are specifically focused on historic tax credits. And when we talk about a tax credit, we're talking about a dollar for dollar credit against one's income taxes. The historic tax credit program has been around since the 70s, but the modern structure of it was created in 1986. So this is not some kind of newfangled thing. It's been working for close to 40 years. Tens of thousands of buildings have been converted using this credit. A couple $100 billion have been leveraged for redevelopment using this tax credit. And the rules were also updated at the end of 2017. The thing to kind of keep in mind here is that there are 4 types of taxpayers that can use tax credits. There are the 3 groups that are listed in green on the left here of my screen, which maybe is the left for you, maybe is the right for you. I'm not 100% sure how the mirroring works on your screen. But over here, in green, where my cursor is moving around, most of the market, probably 95% of the market, maybe even more, is purchased by C corporations and high net worth individuals who have passive income from real estate investments. That is how the infrastructure to place these tax credits works at the moment. But there is a big portion of the taxpayer universe that the infrastructure has ignored that can utilize these tax credits. We call this group community investors, and that is anyone who makes less than $250,000 in adjusted gross income. And so if you are in that bucket, then Congress, when they wrote the 86 tax law, allowed you to participate in historic tax credit investing. But the infrastructure, again, that's been built by the groups that syndicate these credits and place tax credits now, that doesn't allow this group to participate. And that is one of the things that we are working with Historic Albany Foundation and Common Owner and others to try to change. That one thing I want to say while I'm standing, or while we're on this slide, before we get into more of this, is just a little bit of background on me. I have been a tax-advantaged real estate developer for most of the last quarter century. I have worked primarily in the historic tax credit space. And I stopped doing that to start this business during the pandemic, in part because I was so frustrated with how this process normally works, and the fact that the marketplace really excluded individuals who wanted to improve their own community in favor of the C corporations and the high net worth individuals, which is not to say that I'm interested in excluding those groups. I think they're a useful part of the marketplace, but it should be open to everyone. And that's what we are trying to work on. That's kind of primarily why we're here tonight, is that we're helping Historic Albany Foundation and groups like that recognize visions like this to redevelop buildings like 48 Hudson. So again, if we go to this pink taxpayer group from the previous slide, people who make less than $250,000 a year, that's somewhere around 97% of taxpayers. That group pays about $1 trillion in taxes, and the federal historic tax credit market in 2021 was about $1.2 billion. So 1 out of every $800 in taxes paid by this 97% that is currently excluded, that buys the whole marketplace. If you imagine a person that we'll call Sarah, let's say she's a school teacher, she makes $55,000 in income, she pays about $5,000 in taxes. She could, with a $15,000 investment, offset about $3,100, a little more than that, about 60% of her tax liability for the following 5 years by making an investment in a building like 38 or 48 Hudson. So this is just a sense of what her 1040 might look like, what her actual individual tax return might look like, given the profile that we just described. But again, as I already mentioned, Sarah can't do this right now. She doesn't have access to the attorneys and accountants that make this process work for the big corporations and the high net worth individuals. But we are really trying to change that. And again, in partnership with groups like Historic Albany Foundation, Common Owner, and others, we're trying to marry the boardroom and the crowd so that groups that want to see specific changes in their communities happen can pool their money together, their resources together, and make those changes occur. And again, we are trying to educate and provide a process that everyone can participate in. Everyone from Sarah to the C corporations and the high net worth individuals that currently dominate the market. So a little bit of structuring conversations, or a little bit of a structuring conversation to show how this works. And then I'm going to jump to a slide, or not a slide, but a spreadsheet that actually shows potential investments in 48 Hudson at specific dollar amounts. So you get a sense about what the actual returns to capital might be if you made investments at particular levels in this particular project. So anyway, for now, we're going to describe this in a sort of generic way. Let's assume that you've got a nonprofit that wants to create their headquarters. We've got Sarah, who I mentioned before. Maybe there's also a C corporation in that community that wants to invest. They could pool their money with a number of other investors that looked like them and invest in an entity that might be called Nonprofit Headquarters Federal Historic Investor. That entity would purchase an interest in the conversion of that nonprofit headquarters. And you'd then have the investors who would be able to take whatever their tax credit benefit is. You know, in this case, Sarah, with her $15,000 investment, would be able to take almost $3,200 right off the bottom line of her taxes. The C corporation would be able to do something similar based on their investment, but at a larger scale. But they don't just get that tax credit. They also get cash and the ability to sell their interest in the project after 5 years. I'm going to skip some of this because I want to show you the actual numbers for Historic Albany Foundation. But our team right now includes myself, my co-founder, Daniela Rivera-Bryant. As I mentioned, I've spent 25 years doing this type of work in tax leveraged real estate developments, mostly in Louisiana, but also North Carolina, Massachusetts, and Texas. Daniela is an engineer by training and an economist who has worked largely in disaster recovery and community development. You can learn more about us at the Reimagine Fund website or by following this QR code. But let me stop sharing this, and I want to pull up the spreadsheet that I mentioned. So give me just a second here. Here we go. So can y'all now see my screen again? So what we have done working with Kara and team, and just to be clear, this spreadsheet is really the property of the Historic Albany Foundation. You can find a similar version of it, maybe this exact version, on the Testing the Waters page on the Common Owner website. We have 3 different investors, investor A, B, and C, who have invested respectively $250, $1,000, or $10,000, which is a percentage of the total raise, you know, is 0.3%, about 10%, or a little over 1% of all the money that they're looking to raise. If you put a $250 investment into this, you would expect to get $245 back in the first year, almost $200 back in the second year. In the third year, you'd basically get to a point where you've gotten pretty close to getting all your money back. You would likely get all your money back in the fourth year. And then you'd start to get returns in the fifth and sixth year on an expected basis. So that's sort of where, based on their going in expected model, that's what it would look like if you were to invest $250. And over that whole term, you'd have roughly $100 more than you had when you started, with the combination of cash flow and tax credit benefits. If you were to invest $1,000, you can see something similar, where again, by the fourth year, you should have had your money back, and then the fifth and sixth year is when you'd start to see kind of net increase in cash, and you would expect to have about $386 additional to what you invested at the end of the term. Same thing here for the $10,000 investor. You'd expect to have about $3,860 more than what you put in on the front end. I will stop there and see if people have any quick questions before we hand off to, or I hand back to Kara.
Yeah, I was just wondering, where does the cash flow come from?
The historic tax credit entity actually becomes the 99% owner of the building. And the building is operating with rents and other payments that would be made from the users, which are Historic Albany Foundation, various programs of the foundation that would be paying rent back into the ownership, which is another special purpose vehicle created by the Historic Albany Foundation. So it's really revenue that's generated by the operations in the building. And Kara, I don't know if you want to describe that any more clearly than I did, but.
Yeah, the operation expenses are mostly small things like, the water bill for the property, any maintenance, snow shoveling, electricity, things like that. Those are kind of the operating expenses. So not a terrible lot, unfortunately, but heat's not super cheap. So that's probably gonna be the biggest. Other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask any question you like, or if you feel better typing it in the chat, you're welcome to do so as well. I know it's a lot of information to kind of take in at one time too. No questions? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
may I ask a question?
please.
I'm not understanding the cash flow. I understand investor A pays in $250 to the project. And how do they get money back? I'm not.
So let me go line by line here and describe each of these pieces, if that helps. So we'll just deal with investor A. So investor A puts in $250 that once the project is completed, that the tax credits will vest, and they will get a tax credit that they can use to reduce their tax liability by an expected $31.01 in that second year. And that will be true for each of 5 years. And so if you think about this $250 investment as being half for the federal historic tax credits and half for the state historic tax credits, it's effectively saying that you're putting $125 into state or into federal historic tax credits, and you're getting $155 back over this sort of 5-year hold after the building's completed. Does that make sense as a starting point?
Yes, so the investor
Okay.
gets the tax credits. 100%.
Correct. It'll be distributed through a K-1 that is given by the historic tax credit entity, that vehicle that I mentioned where everybody pools their money and they buy an interest in this company, and the company then buys a 99% interest in the project. That historic tax credit company will issue a K-1 to the individual investors that will transfer this $31 benefit to each of the people that puts in the 250, assuming everything works as expected. The second line item on the state tax credits, New York State issues a refund for the tax credits for any liability that a New York State taxpayer can't use in the year in which the credits are awarded. So either this $250 investor will have $158.23 New York State liability, in which case they will be able to reduce their tax burden to the state by that amount, or the state will cut them a check in that second year for whatever amount of liability they don't have. And so that's what the sort of second piece of this is. And again, if you assume that half of the investment is for the state credits and half of them is for the federal tax credits, it's effectively saying you're paying $125 for $158 benefit in that second year. And then the third line item here, this cash flow plus put line item, this is just the proportionate share of this investor's interest in the company. So there's a certain amount of cash flow. And Kara, I don't remember exactly what that's expected to be in these years, but this $2.45 is this percentage of that cash flow. And so this is just the share of what is expected to go back to each of the investors based on the percentage of the company they own. And the additional amount in year 6 is because the investor has the right to put their interest back to the project, which means that the investor can say, okay, project, you have to buy me out now. And so this is the amount that they would be expected to be bought out for, or it's the share of this investor's buyout, effectively. And that's the combination of benefits that you get when you buy that small interest in the historic tax credit company for $250. Does that make more sense, Mr. Black?
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
You're
Gretsch.
welcome.
It does make some more sense. Maybe if I think about it in another 6 months, it'll become clear.
And I'm happy to follow up and talk about it in more detail. And I know, Kara and Pam and others on their team would also be happy to do so. It is a lot, I've spent a quarter century doing this stuff. So, I had a bit of a head start.
Yeah, the project itself doesn't have much cash flow. Historic Albany will be paying rent to the holding company managing the project. So that's where the kind of cash coming in is, and then those operating expenses are what go back out, and that cash flow little bit is kind of what's left over. So there's really only very tiny amount of cash flow for this type of project for us anyway.
Kara, would it be helpful if I shared the organizational chart, maybe?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
I'm gonna stop sharing, Rich, and then you can grab the reins.
Yeah, so
wanna
if folks
Rich?
can see this. Can everyone see this? Sorry.
We can see part of it. It's zoomed in pretty close.
Okay. So essentially, Historic Albany Foundation is leasing the property pursuant to a long-term lease to HAF Holdings 2 LLC. HAF Holdings 2 LLC is the actual issuer of the membership interest, the ownership, the partnership interest. So you know, the investors, so if you were to invest, you would be investing in HAF Holdings 2 LLC. As you could see here, here's our investors, and that's up to 99% of the ownership of HAF Holdings 2 LLC. So Historic Albany Foundation is going to make rent payments to HAF Holdings 2 LLC. HAF Holdings 2 LLC is going to pay operating expenses, and then whatever's left over will be distributed 99% to these investors. These investors will also receive their distributive share of federal and state tax credits that are earned by HAF Holdings 2 LLC as a result of having undertaken the project and incurred the rehabilitation expenses. So, you know, in Will's example of a $250 investor, right? They're going to own less than 1% of this 99% based on the amount that needs to be raised, right? But if you're putting in about $1,000, you're going to get about 1%. So 1% of the credits, both federal and state, and 1% of the cash flows after operating expenses are what will be distributed to these investors. In the spring, you'll receive a Schedule K1, which you can give to your accountant. That Schedule K1 will say precisely how many federal tax credits you'll receive, how many state tax credits you'll receive, and how much, you know, income and losses you'll receive. And then you'll give that to your accountant, and your accountant will add that to your tax return. This entity will be managed by an entity that is a wholly owned affiliate of Historic Albany Foundation, Inc. After the 5 years, after placement in service, 5 years, each owner's interest in this entity will be reduced by a factor of 10. So, you know, if that person who owned 1% would then own 1/10 of 1%, and they would have the option to require Historic Albany Foundation to repurchase their interest. And so that was that amount of cash at the end that Will had referenced before. And so that's how, you know, that cash at the end is essentially a buyout of the interest after the tax credit period has ended.
And I was just going to jump on, Kara. I do need to go now, so I wanted to say thank you. I apologize to everybody that I need to leave a little early. We had a family situation that arose unexpectedly yesterday that kind of messed up my schedule this afternoon. So it was lovely to be with y'all, but I'm going to step away now. I'm definitely available for any questions or any follow-up that people have. And if you didn't catch the website or screen share, I think Kara has my contact information. And I'm happy to respond to any follow-up.
Yep, your info's in the packet. Everybody got, so you're good. Take care of what you do. Thank you for joining us, Will.
All right, thank you all.
All right, Wendy had a question about who is paying for the renovation. Is the initial payment or the initial investment by the owner used to pay? So this is actually mostly grant funded. From the slide we had earlier, a little over $2.4 million will be grants. At this point, we have 2.3 that's actually committed. We have a bridge loan through the Community Loan Foundation or Community Loan Fund. So as all of the expenses are being incurred, we'll be paying them using the bridge loan that we have received. And then all of our grants are reimbursable grants. So we will then voucher each state, federal, private entity for those expenditures. They will pay us back, and it kind of all filters down through this structure that Will has showed. Does that adequately answer your question? Is that clear? Okay. Other questions? I know it's a lot to take in and is not necessarily straightforward in any way. So it may be something just to kind of think about as well. We are going to be posting an FAQ on the offerings page. So if there's questions you don't have now, but think of later, you can check back on the offerings page or email us, and we're happy to answer your questions. That's the great thing about the offering pages. Any questions that come in as we move forward with this will all be posted on the page. So you can check there and get answers to your questions other people had, and whatnot. So that's going to be kind of the clearinghouse for sharing information about this, which might be the perfect segue, unless there's any other questions first. I don't see any hands up, nothing else in the chat. I'll move over to Jake. Well, oh, Michael, you have a question?
Yes. Where do the costs fit in this program for establishing, I don't have the terminology, sorry, but the entity that the managing entity that Historic Albany Foundation creates, and then there's a third entity is the LLC that is the profit-making entity. What are the costs of that setup?
Our soft costs for all of the LLC manage and the offering setup is about $100,000, a little bit less, I think. The majority of our soft costs are actually architectural services. So the actual LLC setup is just kind of a small percentage of the project. Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah, so that 100,000, does that include the architectural fees, or that's just the administrative setup?
That's the administrative setup for the tax credit component, and all of the costs associated with that: bookkeeping, filing fees, and of course there's multiple LLCs, so there's multiple filing fees. It's all of the costs related to that. There's attorney fees, and as we now know, lots of auditing for all of the LLCs that we now have. So that's what makes up that 100,000. Are all of those kind of little soft costs. The architectural services are just shy of $400,000.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute and jump right in, since I can't see everyone. There seems to be no raise your hand button because it's not a webinar technically. So jump in if you have a question real quick.
Yeah, sorry. So just going back to the first page, could you give me the breakdown real quick on how much you were raising through this program?
Absolutely.
That was 1 million, was it?
It's a little bit. So it's $945,000 that we are looking to raise. And those are based on what's called qualifying rehabilitation expenses. So as we like to describe it, when you're looking at all the things you're doing to the building, any improvements you make, if you turn the building upside down and shake it and it doesn't fall out, all of those improvements are qualifying rehabilitation expenses. The architectural services, the engineering services, we do have a good amount of engineering since we're moving a 300-year-old roof back to where it was initially. So we have a good bit of engineering services in there. Our archaeology falls in there as well. And then the costs for the actual tax credit process that we talked about, those are actually also mostly qualifying rehabilitation expenses.
So none of the construction expenses themselves, the rehabilitation expenses themselves, like actual construction, actual people coming and doing work on the buildings, that's not.
The 945,000 absolutely pays for that. Most of it will go toward actual construction.
That's part of the qualifying rehabilitation. That's part
Yeah.
of the qualifying. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. The breakdown is, I think it's a little shy of 500,000 is soft costs, which includes the architectural services, which makes up most of that. But the most of the project, it's over like $2.7 million, is hard construction expenses. And we do have the breakdown of all of this as well on the common owner offering page. And then there's a document that the email you all received with this link, the most recent one had several attachments in it, and that had the breakdown of all of the different costs and funding sources for each of those is also in that. So you can see it in multiple spots as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes. One of the questions asked was, if the improvements are paid for by grant funds, are they still eligible for the tax credits? Yes. And it's almost like a loophole, right? So the managing member entity is paying for the improvements, but because Historic Albany is not getting the tax credits, even though we're getting the grant funds. So the grant funds come into us, we put the grant funds into the holding entity, just like any other investor. The private equity that's going into the project is coming from individuals like potentially all of you. And so it's not technically double dipping in that sense. So yes, we are able to use grant funded expenses as qualified expenses for the tax credits. And that's kind of what makes this whole messy project work financially.
And how did you come across the Reimagine Fund and the crowdfunding idea? How did that come about?
Well, we've worked with Preservation Studios in Buffalo, which is a consulting company that helps a lot of people with tax credit projects, since part of what Historic Albany does is technical services, helping people restore buildings. And the tax credits are kind of the best game in town for restoring historic building. So when we started working on 48 Hudson, we immediately reached out and we were like, okay, like, help us do this. Would we qualify? Would this work for us? Since we're always recommending other people do it, we want to do it too, basically. So we met Rich Rogers and Jake Walsh and several other great guys from a whole group out there with Preservation Studios and Urban Vantage and Yachts Law and Common Owner, who are kind of the experts in New York State on this. And they were the ones with the brainwave of, well, crowdfunding, we've done that before. That would be great for this. And now we're off to the races with crowdfunding.
May I ask another question?
Yes, please.
What percent of the qualified expenses is credit?
It's 40%. So you get 20%
40%.
state, 20% federal.
Thank you.
Other questions? No question is a foolish question. As I've said many times, it's very complicated and not straightforward. So please feel free to ask any questions you'd like.
One more, please.
Yes.
Was there a reason that the additional 10% was not available?
Yes, we had, our project was too expensive. Your rehabilitation expenses have to be under 2.5 million. And so we looked at it and said, okay, could we kind of value engineer a cheaper budget, or we could not take the, include all of the architectural services soft costs in our expenses. And when we crunched a whole bunch of numbers, in the end, it worked out better, not reducing our qualified rehabilitation expenses to get that extra 10%. All right, on that, I'm gonna hand it over to Jake Walsh from Common Owner, who's going to talk a little bit about the listing platform, which is how you can actually invest in this project.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kara. I'm going to share my screen. So my name is Jake Walsh. I'm from Common Owner. We are the platform that Historic Albany Foundation is going to be performing the crowdfunding part of this offering through. So I'm here to speak really about the platform, not the deal itself. You know, Kara and Rich have done a great job answering those questions. But I got a couple bullets I want to just mention of kind of who we are and what we do. And then I'm actually going to also pull up the offering page that is currently live and kind of show you how our platform works. So what Common Owner is we are a registered investment crowdfunding platform. And what that means is we're registered with FINRA and the SEC and can enable businesses and organizations like Historic Albany Foundation to raise money from investors through the internet is really what we are registered and able to do. What we kind of provide through that is a streamlined and compliant process, allowing them to raise this money from individuals. So there's a lot of kind of red tape and rules that FINRA and the SEC have on how this can work. So our portal has been created and we provide a lot of kind of support and guidance through all the filing that's required for Historic Albany Foundation to help them go and prepare, file what's necessary, and then start accepting investments from individuals like yourselves. One thing I do want to note is that we do not handle any of the funds. We're not allowed to due to the regulations. We provide essentially the portal, the website, and then all of the funds will be handled by a third-party escrow provider that we work with. The one we work with and will be handling this offering is called North Capital Private Investments. They are a reputable escrow provider. They work with a lot of crowdfunding portals. They're one of the big names in the game as far as this goes. So they're very good to work with. And kind of what will happen is as investments are made into the offering, all of those funds will be held in escrow until a time when the offering reaches a minimum amount. When they go to make an offering, you have to set a minimum and a maximum. Historic Albany Foundation will not be able to withdraw any of those funds until at least the minimum's been met. Once that happens, they can begin withdrawing funds. Your funds will leave escrow and your investment will become active. If for some reason Historic Albany Foundation was not able to raise that minimum amount, all of the funds that are held in escrow would be returned in full to the investors. I also have our general outreach here, info@commonowner.com. If anyone has questions after this, I'm happy to connect and walk through anything in particular. But I can pause there for a moment if there's any high-level questions, and then if not, I'm going to pull up our actual platform and walk through the offering page for Historic Albany Foundation and kind of how the investment process would work. Okay, well, I will dive into that then. So what I have open here at the moment is the offering page for this investment. This is on commonowner.com right now. Currently, the project is in what's called testing the waters, which is what Kara mentioned at the beginning of this call. And what that is that's kind of a pre-investment. We can't accept any funds yet. The offering isn't officially live, but they are able to list all the information about the project and start to gauge interest from potential investors like you. So now the page is set up. Historic Albany Care has been doing a lot of work. There's pictures here. There's descriptions about the building itself. There's descriptions about the work that's going to be done to it. There's background on Historic Albany Foundation, who's sponsoring this project. There's a lot of supporting information to teach you as the potential investor about the project, about the investment, and learn more about the details of what they're looking to do. Down at the bottom here, there's currently a lot of additional documents that you can download, you can look at. This is their pitch deck, those sample investor profiles that Will Bradshaw was showing earlier on this call, disclosures, things like that. When the offering does go live, there will also be all the official filing documents that get registered with the SEC once this is filed. And all of that will also be available here for your viewing and your download on the platform. At the moment, because as I mentioned, this is in the testing the waters, you can't invest yet. When this is live, this button instead will say invest now. Right now it says express interest. And if you want to, you can click that. You can put in your name, your contact address. You can let Historic Albany know. How interested are you? How much money would you be willing to invest in this based on what you've read? And you can put in questions and contact information as well. So that's kind of what the main page looks like and will look like. Once this goes live, there will be very minimal changes to this page itself, just a few updates letting you know that the project's live and that you can begin investing, and some of those more formal documents and disclosures listed as well. To kind of show you how that will look, I'm going to show what the investment page looks like for a different offering that we do have live on our platform. So if you were able to click Invest Now, it would bring you to a page that looks like this, at which point our platform will intake information about the investment that you're looking to make. So you would be able to enter an investment amount. And then there's one important part here that I definitely want to make sure we walk through for a second. The amount that you can invest in a crowdfunding offering is going to be based somewhat on your level of income or net worth. If you are an accredited investor, then you are able to invest any amount of money into a crowdfunding offering. And for those of you who might be wondering what is an accredited investor, that is determined as someone whose earned income exceeds $200,000 in a given prior 2-year period, or $300,000 if filing with a spouse, or if you have a net worth that is over $1 million. You can also be considered accredited if you have like a Series 7 or a Series 65 or 82 license. So as I said, personal income of $200,000, joint income of $300,000, or net worth over $1 million, you're considered an accredited investor, and you can put as much as you want to into an offering. If you are not accredited, you'll click this No button, and then we have a little calculator that will allow you to put in your information and determine how much you can invest in a given offering. So what our calculator does based on the SEC data is you can put in your annual income or your net worth or both, and it will spit out how much you're allowed to invest in an offering. So for example, and this is not the Historic Albany Foundation offering, this is a different offering we currently have on our site. If you had an income of $50,000, you will be allowed to invest up to $2,500 in a given offering. Say if you then list that your net worth was $100,000, because this is going to work off of both of those, you can actually invest up to $5,000 in a given offering. The final piece of this is how much you can invest is also based on how much you've invested in the past 12 months in any crowdfunding offering, not just Historic Albany, but if you've invested in a different offering through a different portal, that will count. So let's say that I invested $2,000 2 months ago in a different offering. I would enter that here, and then that will lower my investment limit by those $2,000. All this is available. You'll be able to see this once the offering's live. You'll be able to put in your own numbers, and this calculator will let you know how much you can invest based on your personal financial situation. Beyond that, we then just collect your basic personal information, your name, date of birth, country, address. There's a few acknowledgments that you'll have to make, understanding that once an offering closes, your ability to cancel your investment might be limited. That you are purchasing securities, so there isn't necessarily an easy secondary market for you to potentially sell. And also certifying that you're investing in an amount that you are able to invest given on your financial situation. The last piece is you can select a payment method. Through our portal, you can pay through an ACH or bank transfer. You can make a wire transfer. You can even mail in a check if you would like. That will not go to us. That will be mailed directly to our escrow provider. And we take credit cards. You can also invest with an IRA if you want to. That's something that, if you're looking to do, you'll contact us and we'll help connect to your proper IRA account so that investment can be made. Yeah, so I'll pause there. That's what the page will look like once 48 Hudson can begin collecting investment. But for the time being, it's this page as you can currently see with the express interest button, but we're hoping to have the offering live very soon. So I'll pause there, but that is what we are and what we do.
Any questions about the offering page and platform itself for Jake? Again, I'm going to mention any questions that were asked during this program tonight or that have been asked are going to be posted on this page. So as more people kind of continue to ask questions and get more information, we will be posting more about this. So that FAQ section that you see in the middle, there'll be things there. There's the questions. Thank you, Jake. Comment section at the bottom. So we'll be continuing to field questions throughout the entire offering period. We should be going live soon. We do plan to be or keep the offering live for about 12 months or until we have met our goal, which hopefully won't take a whole 12 months. But we do plan to keep this open as long as we need to, essentially, to raise said funds. I think Rich has rejoined us. Do we want to talk at all about the rolling closings a little bit more?
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. There's a term within crowdfunding called a rolling close. And this kind of draws back to earlier when I mentioned that whenever you do a crowdfunding raise, you have to set a minimum goal and a maximum goal. The maximum is the most you can possibly raise. If you reach your maximum, that's it. No more investments can be accepted and the offering closes. However, as long as you pass your minimum, the offering is considered successful and you can begin withdrawing funds. So in this example, Historic Albany Foundation has identified with 945, 750,000, I believe is the total amount. So that is the target max, that's the maximum amount. So that's the absolute most that can be put in this offering. However, we're setting a minimum that's going to be around $250,000. So once that minimum is crossed, Historic Albany can begin withdrawing funds and begin utilizing them and putting them towards the project. We've kind of set this up as something called a rolling close, where essentially Historic Albany has set milestones where every time a milestone is reached, they will then withdraw funds to begin using on the project ongoing. Because as Kara mentioned, the total amount of time this could be up is a year, but they're not hoping to wait a year to begin utilizing those funds. So the milestones that have been identified are $250,000, $500,000, $750,000, and then the total amount. So how this will be set up is that whenever Historic Albany reaches one of those milestones, that will be considered, kind of reaching that more the new target goal, and then they will withdraw funds down from the offering. The withdrawal will happen on the last day of the month that that target is reached, and all investors that have invested up until that point will have until then to kind of make their final decision. Historic Albany will send out a note saying, hey, we reached our goal. We are going to be closing this round, by the end of the month. If you would like to, hold on for a later round for some reason or withdraw your funds, you have until this date to let us know. Otherwise, your funds will be pulled out of escrow, your investment will become active, and we will begin utilizing those funds for the project. And that will happen throughout the project until the final goal is met of the 945.
I know we've exceeded our 6:30 goal for the evening, but we're still happy to field any questions.
Just one brief one, please. Am I assuming correctly that this $945,750 figure is the maximum that's the highest you can go, like that's the most tax credit you can get?
Yes, based on what our anticipated expenditures are. However, if we find that, oh my God, the budget was set way too low and the cost of all of our materials is crazy, custom made brick is just 10 times what we thought it would be, we actually at the end can raise our goal. We would have to notify all of our investors that we are raising what we would anticipating, and there would be more credits available to purchase. Hopefully that does not happen. And our budget stays on top, on schedule, and we're good.
Thank you.
Another question from the chat says, are funds used to match the grant awards, or the grants not require matching funds? Some of the smaller grants that we have received do not require specifically matching funds. However, no one grant was really enough to cover, obviously, the whole project. The state grants that we received, which total about $1.7 million, did have a match requirement. Each of them was slightly different on how much was required as a match. However, for each of those, there could not be a state match. So both state grants can't match each other. However, the federal grant that we have matches the state grant that we have, and then all of the tax credit funds are actually considered a match toward any and all of those grants, because technically that's actually private equity that has been put into the project through private investment from people like you. Yes, Tony, you have a question. Oh, I thought I saw a hand go up. Tony, if you have a question, unmute and feel free to ask. Oh, I can't hear you. Okay. I'm going to go with maybe not then. Any other questions? Look at a quiet crowd tonight. We
Yeah,
must
I
have
think we've overwhelmed everyone. It's taken us a while to figure all of this out, and we still don't necessarily have it all figured out every day.
Yeah, it is exceptionally complicated. As I said many times, please feel free to contact us with questions that you have. We're happy to answer them as they come to you. The more you think about it, the more questions will certainly arise. And we're happy to answer them or get the answers from those who know if we don't. And then we'll be posting both questions and answers on the common owner page. So if there's no other last minute questions, we'll let everyone get on with their evenings. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're very excited about this project, and we're very excited all of you wanted to talk about it with us tonight. So thank you. And please watch our newsletter as well for when this goes live. We should be hopefully sharing that news with all of you soon. So keep your eyes open and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.